Jean-Paul Sartre is often described as a philosopher without morals. Critics accuse him of relativism, nihilism, or ethical irresponsibility. Admirers sometimes celebrate him as a thinker who liberated individuals from moral constraint altogether. Sartre himself encouraged some of this confusion. He repeatedly rejected moral laws, ethical systems, and universal values. He denied that there are rules one can follow to know in advance what one ought to do. And yet Sartre speaks obsessively about responsibility. He speaks about guilt, seriousness, bad faith, justification, and the impossibility of innocence. He condemns evasion, self-deception, and moral alibis with a severity that few moral philosophers match. This raises a genuine problem. How can someone who rejects morality speak so relentlessly in moral terms? To answer this question, one must begin by understanding what Sartre thinks morality usually is, and why he finds it dishonest. Sartre's rejection is not aimed at ethics as such. It is aimed at moral systems that promise certainty. He rejects any account of morality that claims to deliver correct answers in advance, independent of situation, choice, and risk. For Sartre, such systems do not eliminate moral anxiety, they conceal it. Traditional moral philosophies often offer one of two comforts. Some appeal to universal rules, commandments, duties, or rational principles that apply regardless of circumstance. Others appeal to natural ends, human nature, flourishing, or objective goods that actions are supposed to realize. Sartre rejects both approaches. He rejects rule-based ethics because rules convert decision into application. If one merely applies a rule, one no longer experiences oneself as choosing. Responsibility is displaced onto the rule itself. One obeys rather than decides. He rejects nature-based ethics because they treat values as facts. If something is good for humans by nature, then choice again dissolves into recognition. One discovers what one ought to do rather than committing oneself to it. Sartre believes both moves are evasions. For Sartre, morality begins not with rules or goods, but with freedom. And freedom, as he understands it, offers no guarantees. To be free is not to consult a manual. It is to act without certainty that one's action is right. This is why Sartre insists that there is no moral authority outside action itself. No principle can decide in advance what a person ought to do, because the meaning of an action depends on how it is lived, interpreted, and taken up within a concrete situation. This does not mean that anything goes. Sartre rejects that interpretation explicitly. What he denies is that morality can be reduced to formulae. The moral seriousness of an action for Sartre lies in the fact that it is chosen without excuse. One cannot appeal to God, nature, reason, or history to justify oneself. One must answer for what one does. This is why Sartre's writing often sounds accusatory rather than instructive. He does not tell the reader what to do. He tells the reader that they cannot avoid doing something, and that whatever they do will commit them. Commitment is the key word here. For Sartre, values do not exist before action. They come into being through commitment. When one chooses, one does not merely select among options. One affirms a way of valuing the world. One implicitly says, "This is what matters." This affirmation is not private. Sartre insists that every choice projects a vision of humanity. To choose for oneself is also to choose for others, because one affirms that such a choice is acceptable, meaningful, or justified. This claim is often misunderstood as moral arrogance. Sartre is not saying that one legislates for all humanity in a legal sense. He is saying that one cannot avoid presenting one's action as defensible. To act is to say implicitly, this is how one may act. This is why Sartre believes moral responsibility is heavier, not lighter, in the absence of rules. Without rules, one cannot hide behind obedience. One must own the meaning of one's action. This is also why Sartre rejects moral innocence. There is no position from which one can act without implication. Even refusal, neutrality, or silence is a stance that carries meaning. At this stage, Sartre does not offer a moral theory. He offers a diagnosis. He is trying to show why the desire for moral systems is itself a response to anxiety. People want rules because rules promise relief from doubt. Sartre denies that such relief is honest. He believes that morality, if it is to be taken seriously, must remain exposed to uncertainty. The moment one feels morally secure, one has likely stopped choosing. This explains why Sartre often appears hostile to morality. He is hostile to moral comfort. He distrusts any ethical language that removes risk from action. This does not mean Sartre denies moral judgment. He judges relentlessly. But his judgments are not grounded in rule violation. They are grounded in evasion of responsibility. Bad faith for Sartre is not merely a psychological flaw. It is a moral failure. The failure to own one's freedom. To lie to oneself about one's agency is, for Sartre, ethically worse than choosing badly in good faith. This reverses many traditional moral intuitions. It suggests that sincerity without responsibility is morally empty, while responsibility without certainty is morally serious. By the end of this first part, the core tension should be clear. Sartre rejects morality as a system, but not morality as a demand. He refuses ethical guarantees, but not ethical seriousness. He denies rules, but not judgment. The question therefore shifts. If Sartre is not offering a moral system, then what kind of moral thinker is he? What replaces rules, principles, and universal goods? And how does one live ethically without collapsing into arbitrariness or despair? Those questions cannot be answered abstractly. They must be answered in relation to action, situation, and responsibility. And that is where the pressure increases. If Sartre rejects moral systems, then something must take their place. He does not deny this need. He denies only the hope that morality can be made safe, procedural, or guaranteed. What replaces moral systems in Sartre's philosophy is not relativism, but responsibility without refuge. Sartre insists that morality begins not with principles, but with action in situation. Ethical meaning does not precede action. It emerges through it. This means that moral judgment cannot be separated from context, risk, and consequence. There is no ethical position that floats above the world. This is why Sartre refuses to write an ethical code. Any code would promise certainty in advance. It would allow individuals to say, "I did what was required," rather than, "I chose this, and I accept its meaning." For Sartre, the latter statement is the beginning of ethics. This shift radically alters how moral judgment works. Judgment is no longer about rule following. It is about how honestly one inhabits one's freedom. The central ethical failure is not breaking a rule, but denying agency. This is why Sartre places such weight on bad faith. Bad faith is not merely self-deception. It is the moral failure of refusing responsibility while continuing to act. It is the attempt to enjoy the benefits of freedom while denying its costs. A person acting in bad faith may follow every rule and still be morally corrupt. A person acting in good faith may violate conventions and still be morally serious. Sartre does not guarantee that good faith produces good outcomes. He insists only that it preserves integrity. Integrity, for Sartre, does not mean consistency with a moral system. It means coherence between one's freedom, one's action, and one's acknowledgement of responsibility. This is where Sartre's moral position becomes heavier than traditional ethics. Without rules, one cannot outsource judgment. One must decide without certainty and accept that others may judge differently. This does not collapse morality into subjectivity. Sartre rejects the idea that moral claims are merely personal preferences. He insists that action always projects values into the world. To act is to say, "This is what ought to be done," even if one refuses to say so explicitly. This projection makes judgment unavoidable. Others are entitled to judge actions because actions present themselves as meaningful. One cannot say, "This is just my choice," and escape evaluation. Sartre believes that such a retreat misunderstands the public nature of action. Action always occurs in a shared world. This shared world is why Sartre believes responsibility extends beyond the self. When one chooses under conditions that affect others. One cannot isolate the moral meaning of one's actions to one's private intentions. This is where Sartre's moral thought begins to move toward politics, even though it is not yet political. Ethics cannot remain private once freedom is recognized as public and interdependent. Sartre also rejects the idea that morality is primarily about judging others. His focus is on self-judgment, not in the sense of guilt, but in the sense of lucidity. To judge oneself honestly is to refuse alibis. Alibis are central to Sartre's critique of morality. People often use morality itself as an alibi. They cite duty, obedience, or moral law to avoid responsibility for the meaning of their actions. Sartre treats this as a deeper moral failure than error. This is why Sartre does not promise moral comfort. He does not promise that acting responsibly will feel good, be rewarded, or be vindicated by history. Moral life for Sartre is exposed to failure, misunderstanding, and regret. What matters is not purity, but seriousness. Seriousness, in Sartre's sense, does not mean grimness. It means refusing to treat values as things that exist independently of action. It means recognizing that values live only insofar as they are enacted. This recognition also reshapes how Sartre understands moral disagreement. Without universal rules, disagreement cannot be resolved by appeal to authority. It must be lived through conflict, persuasion, and commitment. Sartre does not offer a method for resolving disagreement peacefully. He explains why disagreement is unavoidable. This is one reason Sartre's ethics is often seen as dangerous. It offers no guarantee against fanaticism or violence. Sartre does not deny this risk. He insists that risk is unavoidable in moral life. Rules do not eliminate fanaticism, they disguise it. Sartre believes that moral systems often become tools of domination precisely because they claim certainty. When people believe they possess moral truth, they feel justified in imposing it. Sartre's refusal of certainty is therefore also a refusal of moral innocence. This does not mean Sartre abandons judgment. He judges actions by asking whether they affirm or deny freedom, one's own and that of others. Actions that treat others as mere things, instruments, or obstacles are ethically suspect because they deny the very condition that makes value possible. This criterion is not a rule, it is a demand. It must be interpreted in situation. It offers no easy answers. By the end of this analysis, the answer to the original question should be clear. Yes, Sartre is a moral philosopher, but not in the traditional sense. He does not offer a morality of rules. He offers a morality of responsibility. He does not tell us what to do. He tells us that whatever we do, we are responsible for its meaning. This makes Sartre's moral philosophy more demanding than most. It offers no refuge, no alibi, and no guarantee. It asks individuals to act without excuses and to accept judgment without appeal. That is not the rejection of morality, it is its radicalization.